Hello, dear friends. My name is Sofya Dorinskaya. I am a psychiatrist and the head of the Medical Information Center. Today, I would like to talk to you about such an action as restoring the thyroid gland. What we need to understand when the thyroid gland is being restored. And most importantly, here is how to correctly interpret the various medical tests that we must undergo during the essential process of successfully restoring your thyroid function. Today I will show you this with examples. A 41-year-old woman. She came to us in April 2020. Her diagnosis is hypothyroidism, meaning her thyroid gland does not produce enough hormone, and she was taking Euthyrox 0.25 once a day. She was given a recommended plan to address nutrient deficiencies. So, as I said, she came in April. And on July 15th, she sent us her test results. According to the tests, her thyroid-stimulating hormone increased. That's the first thing. What is thyroid-stimulating hormone? It is a hormone produced by the pituitary gland, the main hormone that regulates the thyroid gland. When thyroid-stimulating hormone is active, the thyroid gland produces its secretion. So her levels increased. Her thyroid-stimulating hormone increased, but the hormones produced by the thyroid gland, thyroxine and triiodothyronine, are completely within the normal range. So her thyroxine is 16.39, with the normal range being 10 to 22, and her triiodothyronine is 4.10, with the normal range being 3.10 to 6.8. In other words, I am completely normal values of the hormones, while her thyroid-stimulating hormone has increased. Well, naturally, what does this mean? That is, her thyroid-stimulating hormone is 5.49, 5.56, while the upper limit is 4.2, so it's a little above the normal range. Well, naturally, the body is restoring the function of its gland. And naturally, in order for the body to regain its strength, with the presence of nutrients, including iodine, naturally the body regains strength, and of course this activates the pituitary gland. Thyroid-stimulating hormone is released, and we see the restoration of the thyroid gland's own function. Naturally, since the person is taking external thyroid hormone, we expect a situation of hyperthyroidism. This is an absolutely expected situation, and we warn the person about it. We expect manifestations of hyperthyroidism, tachycardia, sleep disturbances, sweating, irritability, everything that comes with it. What does this mean? It means that when the thyroid gland's own function is restored and hormone levels return to normal, the external hormone becomes unnecessary. And logic. Common sense. They indicate that the external hormone needs to be reduced or discontinued. And so we have restored the thyroid gland's function because the person has had the obstructing factors, nutrient deficiencies, eliminated. Since we do not cancel the prescriptions made by local doctors, naturally, and that's the right approach, and it will always be this way, we send the person to their own doctor. With this data, we say, please let your doctor start considering adjusting the dosage, maybe reduce it by half or even discontinue it altogether, and so on. Imagine our surprise when this woman came back with a prescription from her endocrinologist to double her dose of Euthyrox. Ladies and gentlemen endocrinologists, for those who do this, I know that not all of you do this because we have a large number of people whose thyroid glands have recovered. I know endocrinologists, not by name, but through the people who visit you and by your recommendations. I know endocrinologists who understand the essence of the process. But in this particular case, I would like to focus on this particular prescription from the endocrinologist. A person's own thyroid function is being restored. The person is taking an external thyroid hormone, which leads to thyrotoxicosis. If we decide to add even more of this external hormone into the system, You must understand that the human body simply cannot distinguish whether the hormone is coming from an external source or if it is its own natural production. Consequently, the brain will begin to think that the thyroid gland itself has suddenly started producing far too much of its own internal hormone. And what do we end up with? Ultimately, we end up triggering and activating the body's very own complex immune defense system, which then gradually begins to aggressively attack and systematically destroy the thyroid gland. And we end up with autoimmune thyroiditis. And if this woman, who is our client and currently 41 years old, had actually followed that specific medical recommendation, she would have almost certainly developed a severe case of autoimmune thyroiditis. Everything was explained to her, the Center for Medical Information. Everything was explained to this woman, of course, what was happening, and she was referred to another doctor. But the good news is that this woman stopped it herself. She stopped taking Euthyrox and everything is fine with her. In other words, she sends in her reports and everything is stabilizing. And of course, I think that at the next follow-up tests, everything will return to normal. And then we'll see what the test results show next. How her deficiencies are being corrected, and that's it. The woman feels well. So you need to understand the logic of the body, and you need to understand what's happening, where the situation is heading when you look at the interim results. Now, please, you might say, well, she is only 41 years old, a relatively young woman, fine, but then consider a 67 years old patient. A woman came to us recently who was suffering with autoimmune thyroiditis. So 3 years ago she was diagnosed with this, and her thyroglobulin antibodies were 366, with the upper normal limit being 115. So 3 years ago. And before she came to us, that is after 3 years, her autoimmune thyroiditis was progressing, and she came to us with thyroglobulin antibodies, 618.7. And she started taking nutrients, which of course are included. And this is essential. And please, here is what we have, her indicator dynamics. On December 14th, 2019, her thyroglobulin antibodies were at 618. A nutrient regimen was prescribed and the woman started taking it. By April 21st, her antibodies were at 329. On August 1st, 2020, 8 months later, it was 169. With the normal value being 115, roughly speaking, by 5 times. Her levels dropped, her thyroglobulin antibodies decreased. At the same time, her free thyroxine levels showed the following trend: 8.1, 7.2, 8.33. That is, in December it was 8.1. In April, 7.2. In August, 8.33. The normal range is from 10 to 22. And her thyroid-stimulating hormone was, in December, 28.52, in April, 33.85, and on August 1st, 10.84. The normal range is 0.27 to 4.2. In other words, her own hormones have started to return to normal. So we haven't finished yet, the work isn't done. She has literally just 50 units left to reach the upper limit of the normal range for antithyroglobulin antibodies. Next, her thyroid-stimulating hormone needs to decrease by half, and then she will be within the normal range. And she only has literally 2.5 units left for her free thyroxine to return to normal, considering how high her levels were before. Her thyroid-stimulating hormone was 28.5, with the normal being 4.2, 5 times higher. Well, almost 6 times higher. What I want to say is this. Our physical body is not merely a simple shell, soulless. Our body is a living organism. And most importantly, what we truly need to understand is that when we are carefully restoring the body's natural function, we must interpret every single detail very carefully and thoughtfully, the indicators that our body gives us. What conclusion can I draw? A conclusion about the actions of the endocrinologist. First of all, the endocrinologist has never firstly restored the function of an endocrine gland herself. And secondly, she has never seen how the function of an endocrine gland is restored. Ladies and gentlemen endocrinologists, the function of an endocrine gland can be restored. Oh, excuse me, please. An endocrinologist has never seen the restoration of thyroid function, and she does not understand the mechanics. She does not understand how to interpret the intermediate indicators. Restoration of thyroid function. I want to say, first of all, that the thyroid function can be restored. It is not always necessary to send everyone with autoimmune thyroiditis for thyroid removal and lifelong hormone therapy. That is not correct. By the way, the thyroid gland is not mentioned in any side effect descriptions. The thyroid gland simply fails in people who take antidepressants. It's a scourge. There is a complex hormonal process going on there involving an increase in female sex hormones. But that's a secondary issue, roughly speaking. Nevertheless, thyroid function can be restored. And please, when you look at the indicators, first aim to restore this function, and second, please interpret them correctly. And next, don't forget that the essential nutrient for the thyroid gland is iodine. Never forget that. Never forget that when the body lacks a nutrient, at first it starts to push its organs, it stimulates them, you see? And we end up with hyperthyroidism. But this doesn't mean that the person has an excess of iodine. It means they have a deficiency. And you are looking at the first phase, you are looking at the response phase, which is meant to compensate for this. The thyroid tissue increases in size. The next phase is the exhaustion phase. You can't flog a dead horse, there's nothing left there. And then we develop hypothyroidism. But again, that's because it was never provided. The body never got enough iodine. Do you understand? That's why the essential substance for the thyroid gland is iodine. And now someone will say to me, oh, such doses of iodine, you could get poisoned. Let's just look at the recommended iodine levels. For example, in the USA, the normal dose is considered to be iodine. The average therapeutic dose is 700 micrograms. That's almost twice as much as in Russia. Moreover, in Russia, iodine deficiency is kind of a problem, especially in the Urals, for example. Everyone knows that this is an issue. But people who live on the shores of warm seas per day, they consume it in various ways. They have warm seas, they have seaweed, the iodine is even in the air. They breathe it in, up to 2 milligrams per day. You see? For that reason, it is important to state that you'll poison yourself with this iodine. Well, listen, if a person is deficient, just monitor their levels. But just make sure you understand those levels. If a person with hypothyroidism is taking additional thyroid hormones and you give them iodine, you should expect hyperthyroidism because the thyroid gland starts to recover. You just need to eventually take them off your Euthrox or any other medication. And that's it. The person is healthy, happy, and you are a really great doctor. So, the function of the thyroid gland can be restored, but it can only be restored if you understand how the thyroid works and if you work with it properly. And most importantly, you need to interpret the test results very accurately and understand what you are looking at. Speaking about our work, I can say that restoring people's thyroid glands, the thyroid gland, yes, is no longer something extraordinary or unexpected for us. This has already become standard practice, and we already know what will happen. We know the stages a person will go through, and people do go through this process, restore their thyroid function, and in general, leave healthy and happy. Pockets. This was Sofya Dorinskaya with you. All the best. Goodbye.